1911, Duluth. Gray water, stone breakwater, cold wind off Superior. A carbide lamp rests on the catwalk where no keeper left it. Footprints circle the beacon housing in patterns that make no mathematical sense. If the boy never reached the rocks below, who chalked his arithmetic on the keeper's slate 3 days after he went missing? The gale arrived on November 3rd just after breakfast. Wind pushed down from the head of Lake Superior with sleet hard enough to rattle window panes in the school buildings along the hill. The breakwater lighthouse stood a quarter-mile offshore, connected to land by a narrow stone causeway that went under at high water. Most days children walked past it on their way to the docks where fathers worked the oar boats. On calm afternoons they counted the beacon flashes for practice. One flash every 10 seconds. White light cutting through fog. The pattern never changed. The schoolboy was 10 years old. No one remembers his coat color, but everyone recalls the slate he carried. Gray stone in a wooden frame, chalk tied with string. He wrote his numbers carefully. Teachers said he showed promise with figures. That morning he left school at the lunch bell and walked toward the breakwater alone. 3 classmates saw him from the church steps. He was counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. Matching his steps to the beacon rhythm. The wind took his cap and he did not chase it. He kept walking toward the stone teeth where the causeway met the lighthouse foundation. The keeper was inside the tower changing the carbide canister. He heard nothing over the wind. When he climbed to the lamp room 20 minutes later, the boy was gone. The causeway showed no one. The rocks below held only foam and dark water. The keeper rang the alarm bell and men came running from the oar docks with poles and rope. They searched the gaps between the stones where bodies sometimes wedged after falling. The water gave up bottle glass worn smooth, fish bones, a brass button with thread still attached but no fabric. The button carried no maker's mark. No coat was ever found to match it. Behind the lamp mechanism, tucked into the iron frame where the keeper reached to adjust the focus, someone had placed a slate. The keeper's hands were shaking when he brought it down. The slate showed arithmetic problems, long division. Sums carried into the hundreds. The chalk was fresh enough to smudge. The date written at the top was November 6th, 3 days ahead. The keeper said he checked that space during his morning inspection. It had been empty. He was certain. On the catwalk that circled the lamp housing, frost gathered in rings. Small circles about the size of a child's shoe. The rings refused to melt, even when the keeper pressed his palm to the iron and breathed on them. The temperature outside was 28 degrees. The lamp housing radiated enough heat to keep ice from forming anywhere near it. But the rings stayed. Perfect circles, each one identical, spaced as if someone had stood in place and turned slowly while the metal froze beneath them. The horn that signaled noon to the dock workers blared 11 times instead of 12. The keeper counted. Other men counted. 11 blasts, then silence. No one had touched the mechanism. The compressed air system ran on a timer set by the harbor master's office. It had never failed. After the 11th blast, the horn went dead. No amount of pressure would start it again until the next day when it resumed its normal pattern without explanation. One dock worker said it sounded like someone answered the 11th call. He could not explain what he meant. The other men did not press him. Search parties worked the shoreline until dark. They brought dogs that lost the scent at the causeway's edge. The animals circled and whined but would not approach the lighthouse foundation. A diver went down at low tide and found the stones clean. No clothing, no body wedged in the underwater gaps. The lake bed sloped away into darkness 40 feet below the surface. The diver said the water felt wrong, colder in patches. He came up early and would not go back. The boy's mother identified the brass button. She said it came from his Sunday coat, but the coat was hanging in their home. She brought it to the harbor master's office. All the buttons were present. The thread color did not match what the searchers found. She took the strange button and put it in her apron pocket. Later, she said it felt warm. Later still, she said it had vanished from her pocket between the office and her home, though she never opened the fabric or reached inside. Night fell, and the beacon resumed its cycle. One flash every 10 seconds. White light sweeping across black water. The keeper stayed in the lamp room. He said the rhythm felt wrong. He counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But between the 9th and 10th second he felt an extra beat. Not a flash. A hesitation, as if the light paused to gather itself before completing the sequence. He marked it in his log. Anomaly in timing, he wrote. Lamp mechanism functioning, fuel supply normal, but sequence delayed by approximately 1/2 second per cycle. No mechanical cause identified. The schoolboy's desk at the classroom held his books: geography, arithmetic, a composition notebook with careful handwriting. The last entry was dated November 2nd. He had written about the lighthouse. He described the beacon as a clock that never ran down. He wondered what would happen if someone stood in the light long enough. Would they become part of the cycle? Would the light carry them away? His teacher read the passage to the harbor master. She said the boy had asked questions about refraction, about how light bent through water, about whether a person could follow a beam to its source if they moved fast enough. On the morning of November 4th, the keeper found a carbide lamp on the catwalk. Not his lamp. Not any lamp from the lighthouse inventory. This one was older. The brass casing showed verdigris. The wick had been trimmed recently. The fuel chamber was full. The keeper had walked that catwalk an hour earlier during his inspection. The lamp had not been there. He brought it inside and checked the harbor master's records. No one had visited the lighthouse. The causeway was under watch. The lamp had simply appeared. The town's physician examined the frost rings. He brought calipers and measured them. 7 inches in diameter. Depth less than 1/4 inch. Uniform spacing around the lamp housing at intervals of 60 degrees. 6 rings total. He scraped samples and examined them under magnification. The ice crystals showed no irregularities. Common frost. But the pattern made no sense. Frost formed where moisture condensed on cold metal. The lamp housing was hot. The surrounding air was cold but moving, driven by wind that should have prevented any static formation. The physician wrote a letter to a colleague in Chicago who studied atmospheric phenomena. The colleague never replied. Trawler crews working the outer harbor reported odd sightings. Lights below the surface, not the beacon's reflection. Something deeper, moving in the same 10-second intervals. One captain marked the location on his chart. When he returned the next day, the lights were gone. The water depth matched what his charts indicated. 90 feet. No obstructions, no underwater features that could trap light or create refractions. He stopped mentioning it after other captains called him tired. The slate disappeared from the harbor master's locked office on November 5th. The keeper had placed it in an evidence drawer with a written description and his signature. The drawer was opened the next morning for a routine inspection. The slate was gone. The lock showed no tampering. The windows were secured. The keeper's description remained. Someone had drawn a question mark in the margin next to the date November 6th. No one admitted to making the mark. The lighthouse archives held construction records going back to 1858. The breakwater had been built in stages. The first beacon was a simple iron pole with a lantern. The tower came later. In 1883, a second beacon was proposed for the outer harbor. Funding was approved. Foundation stones were laid. Then the project stopped. No explanation in the records. No notation of cancellation. The stones were still visible at low tide, forming a rough circle 200 yards north of the existing lighthouse. Local fishermen avoided the spot. They said the water swirled wrong there. Said compasses acted drunk when boats passed over the old foundation. On November 6th, the day written on the slate, the keeper climbed to the lamp room before dawn. He wanted to watch the sunrise. The beacon was still running, its cycle unbroken through the night. As the first light came over the water, he saw something on the catwalk, a small shape. He opened the door and the wind hit him. The shape was gone, but where it had been, the frost rings were deeper, carved into the metal. He ran his finger along one. The groove was precise, too precise, as if someone had traced it with a tool. But the metal showed no scoring, just the depression, perfectly round, perfectly smooth. The schoolboy's classmates were interviewed again. One girl said she saw him stop at the causeway entrance. said he looked up at the beacon and raised his hand, like he was waving or counting. She could not be sure. The wind was too loud. Another boy said the missing child had talked about the beacon the day before. Said the light was a door. Said if you matched your breathing to the flashes you could walk through. The teacher dismissed it as children's imagination, but she noted the conversation in her daily log. The page was later torn out. The teacher said she did not remove it. A telegraph operator at the harbor office reported an unusual transmission on November 7th. The message came through at 3 in the morning. No sender identification. Just a series of numbers. Long division problems. The same problems that had been on the slate. The operator copied them down and brought them to the harbor master. The paper showed the calculations carried out correctly. Each answer underlined twice. The transmission came from no registered station. The operator checked his equipment. Everything functioned normally. He sent a query to the regional office asking about unauthorized transmitters. They found none. Search efforts expanded to the shoreline north and south of the breakwater. Volunteers walked the beaches looking for anything the lake might have returned. They found driftwood, rusted tools, fragments of oarboat cargo. One man found a child's shoe. The leather was dry, no water damage. The shoe had been polished recently. It matched no description of what the boy had worn. The man brought it to the harbor master anyway. It was placed in the evidence drawer where the slate had been. The next morning it was gone. The drawer had been locked. The key never left the harbor master's possession. The weather cleared on November 8th. The lake turned blue under pale sun. The beacon's pattern was visible even in daylight. Men stood on the docks and watched. The light flashed white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But in the gap between 9 and 10, something flickered. Not the beacon. Something smaller. Softer, like a candle in a window. The men argued about what they saw. Some said it was nothing. Some said it was the beacon's reflection off the lamp housing. One man said it looked like a carbide lamp burning inside the light itself. The keeper's log for November 9th recorded normal operations. Fuel consumption steady. Lamp mechanism clean. Weather fair. But at the bottom of the page he added a note. The sequence continues to show minor irregularities in timing. The delay between the 9th and 10th flash has increased to 1 full second. This does not affect the overall cycle, which completes every 10 seconds as required. I cannot determine the source of the delay. The beam appears to pause, as if the light must travel farther than the lamp room allows. I'll now pause the narrative here and ask if you'd like me to continue with the second half of the story. A retired keeper who had served the lighthouse in the 1890s came forward. He was 83 years old. His hands shook when he spoke. He said there had been trouble with the beacon before, back in 1889. A maintenance worker had gone up to replace the lamp housing and never came down. They found his tools on the catwalk, his lunch pail unopened. No sign of a fall, no body in the water. The search lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, the beacon began flashing in groups of 11 instead of the required 10-second intervals. The harbor master at the time had the entire mechanism dismantled and rebuilt. The pattern corrected itself. The old keeper said no one talked about it afterward. Said the worker's name was removed from the employment logs. He could not remember it now. Just that it happened. Just that the light had changed. The physician returned to examine the frost rings again on November 10th. He brought a colleague from the university. Together they measured temperature gradients around the lamp housing. The readings made no sense. The metal should have been uniformly hot from the beacon's heat source. Instead, they found cold spots, precise circles matching the frost ring locations. The temperature dropped 15 degrees within those circles. Nowhere else. The cold remained constant even when they placed warming elements nearby. The colleague suggested metal fatigue, stress fractures allowing cold air to penetrate. But inspection showed the housing was solid. No cracks, no gaps. The metal was 40 years old and showed normal wear. Nothing that would explain isolated thermal anomalies. A woman who lived near the harbor came to the harbor master's office with a story. She said her son had been friends with the missing boy. They had played together near the breakwater many times. A week before the disappearance, her son came home talking about a game the missing boy had invented. He called it Walking the Beam. You stood at the causeway entrance and watched the beacon. When the light flashed, you took one step forward. You matched your movement to the light's rhythm. 1 step per flash. The goal was to reach the lighthouse door in exactly 100 flashes. Her son said the missing boy was good at it, said he could keep the count in his head without breaking stride. The woman asked if this mattered. The harbor master wrote it down. He did not know. Oarboat crews reported instrument failures near the breakwater, compasses that spun without settling, depth finders that showed readings 40 feet shallower than the charts indicated. One captain logged a formal complaint. He said the magnetic interference was worsening, said his navigation equipment showed the lighthouse foundation was moving, not physically. The readings suggested the structure existed in 2 locations simultaneously, one where it stood, another 200 yards north where the old foundation stones lay. He demanded a survey. The harbor master ordered a crew to check both locations. They found nothing unusual. The stones were stones. The lighthouse was the lighthouse. The captain maintained his complaint. He stopped using that channel after dark. On November 11th, exactly 8 days after the disappearance, the keeper found something new in the lamp room. A composition notebook. Not the missing boy's. This one was older. The pages were yellowed. The handwriting was careful but faded. The entries dated back to 1889. The final entry was written by the maintenance worker who had vanished that year. He described feeling pulled toward the beacon when it flashed, described hearing a rhythm beneath the light's cycle, a softer pulse, like breathing. He wrote that he believed the light was not just reflecting off the lake but into it. He theorized that the beacon was a marker for something below the surface, something that answered when the light called. The entry ended mid-sentence. The notebook had been in the lamp room for 22 years. The keeper had cleaned that room weekly. He swore it had never been there. The harbor master organized a final, systematic search on November 12th. 20 men divided the breakwater into sections. They worked at low tide when the rocks were most exposed. Each man carried a pole to probe the gaps. They worked in silence. The wind had dropped. The lake was calm. The beacon turned above them. 1 flash every 10 seconds. They found nails, broken glass, sections of rope so old they crumbled when touched. In the gap closest to the lighthouse foundation, a man found something wedged between 2 stones. A lantern, not a carbide lamp, an older design. Oil burning. The glass chimney was intact. The brass base showed heavy corrosion. The wick had been lit recently. Carbon stained the glass. The lantern was identical to those used in the 1880s before carbide became standard. The man handed it up. The keeper examined it. The fuel reservoir was full. The oil was fresh. Someone suggested the boy had fallen through into a cavity beneath the breakwater, that the stones were hollow in places, that he might be trapped below the waterline. Divers went down again. They followed the foundation deeper than before. They found solid bedrock. No cavities. No gaps large enough to hide a body. The stones were mortared together. The construction was sound. One diver reported feeling current where none should exist. Water moving laterally through solid rock. He could not explain it. The other divers felt nothing unusual. They surfaced and reported the area clear. Another theory centered on confusion caused by the storm. That the boy had been disoriented by wind and sleet. That he wandered away from the causeway and fell elsewhere. Search parties extended their range 5 miles in each direction. They checked abandoned buildings, mine shafts, ice houses, every place a child might seek shelter. They found nothing. The boy's cap was eventually recovered 2 miles south, wedged in a pile of driftwood. The fabric was dry, no water damage. It had been outside for 9 days in November weather. It should have been soaked and frozen. The cap felt warm when the finder picked it up. Some people spoke quietly about the lake itself, about how Superior was deep and cold and old, about how it held things. They mentioned other disappearances over the years, swimmers who went under and never surfaced, Sailors who stepped away from their boats and were simply gone. Bodies that washed up months later in impossible locations, upstream from where they vanished, untouched by fish or time. They said the lake had currents no chart could map. Said there were places where the water went down and did not come back up. The harbor master did not include these statements in his official report, but his secretary wrote them down anyway in the margins of the daily log. A school teacher who specialized in natural history offered another possibility. She suggested the cold water could preserve remains in unexpected ways. That if the boy had fallen into a deep section, his body might sink to a point where temperature and pressure prevented decomposition or surfacing. That he could rest on the lakebed, held down by forces that would keep him there indefinitely. She cited examples from other deep lakes. She provided diagrams of thermoclines and density layers. The harbor master thanked her. He did not pursue the theory. The water at the breakwater was not deep enough. The divers had confirmed this. 90 feet maximum. Bodies surfaced from such depths within days, sometimes hours. The lake had not kept the boy. It had not taken him at all. A stranger arrived in Duluth on November 14th. He introduced himself as a surveyor working for the Lake Carriers Association. He asked to see the lighthouse construction records. He spent 2 days in the archives. He copied information about the abandoned beacon project from 1883. He measured distances on harbor charts. On his 3rd day, he requested permission to examine the old foundation stones at low tide. The harbor master accompanied him. The stones formed a circle as recorded. But the surveyor's measurements showed something the charts did not. The circle's diameter matched the current lighthouse's foundation exactly. He said this was unusual. Foundation designs varied by location and era. Identical measurements across a 25-year gap suggested either copied plans or intentional redundancy. He asked why the second beacon was abandoned. The harbor master had no answer. The surveyor left Duluth the next morning. He filed no report. The keeper's behavior changed. He stopped sleeping. Other lighthouse personnel reported seeing him on the catwalk at odd hours. He paced the iron circle, counting under his breath. When questioned, he said he was trying to match the rhythm, trying to feel what the boy felt. He said the beacon's timing had shifted again. The pause between the 9th and 10th flash now lasted 2 full seconds. He demonstrated this for the assistant keeper who confirmed the delay. But when they timed the complete cycle, it still totaled 10 seconds. The light was losing time within itself without affecting the overall pattern. The keeper said this was impossible. He was right. It was impossible. It happened anyway. On November 17th, the telegraph operator received another transmission. 3 in the morning again. Same format. No sender. This time, the message contained coordinates. Latitude and longitude expressed in degrees, minutes, and seconds. The operator plotted them on a harbor chart. The position fell directly over the abandoned foundation stones. He brought the chart to the harbor master. They examined it together. The coordinates were precise, professional, the kind of notation a surveyor would use. But the transmission had come through on an emergency frequency reserved for maritime distress calls. No one should have been using that frequency for casual messages. The operator queried regional stations again. No unauthorized transmitters. No explanation. The missing boy's mother visited the lighthouse on November 18th. The keeper met her at the causeway entrance. She said she needed to see where her son had last been. The keeper walked her across. The wind was up. The beacon flashed above them. She stopped at the gap where searchers had found the brass button. She knelt and put her hand on the stone. She stayed there for several minutes. When she stood, she said the rock was warm. The keeper touched it. The stone was cold. She insisted. She said it felt like a hand, like someone beneath the surface pressing up. The keeper escorted her back. She never returned. A final organized effort was mounted on November 20th. The harbor master requisitioned a crane barge used for breakwater maintenance. The plan was to lift the foundation stones one by one and examine the space beneath. It was expensive. It required permits. But the boy's family had influence and the town council approved the measure. The barge arrived at dawn. The crane operator positioned the equipment over the first stone. Chains were attached, the hydraulics engaged. The stone lifted 6 inches and stopped. Not mechanical failure. The crane's capacity was sufficient, but the stone would not rise further. It felt, the operator said, as if something beneath was holding it down. They tried 3 more stones. Same result. Each one lifted partially, then stopped, as if weight that did not exist prevented their removal. The operation was abandoned. That evening, the keeper climbed to the lamp room and found the carbide lamp again, the one that had appeared on November 4th. It was sitting on the chart table where he maintained his logs. He had locked it in the storage room downstairs. He was certain. The fuel chamber was empty now. The wick was cold, but a message had been scratched into the brass casing. Not words, numbers, a date. November 22nd, 2 days ahead. Beneath the date, a time. 3 a.m. The keeper reported this to the harbor master immediately. The harbor master placed guards at the lighthouse. 2 men were stationed at the causeway entrance, 2 more in the tower itself. They were told to watch for anything unusual. They were told to prevent anyone from approaching the beacon. November 21st passed without incident. The guards saw nothing. The beacon maintained its pattern. The weather held fair. At 2:30 in the morning on November 22nd, the keeper woke to silence. The beacon had stopped. Not the light itself. The sound. The lamp mechanism ran on a pressurized fuel system that produced a low hiss. That sound was constant. It was gone. The keeper ran to the lamp room. The beacon was still flashing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And there, in the gap before 10, he saw it. A shape inside the light. Small. Moving. A child walking away down a corridor that did not exist. The figure grew smaller with each flash. Diminishing. The keeper shouted. The guards came running. By the time they reached the lamp room, the shape was gone. The beacon completed its 10th flash. The hiss returned. Everything was normal. At dawn, the keeper found a document tucked behind the chart table. An official log sheet from 1883. The header identified it as part of the abandoned beacon project. The sheet documented a test of the foundation's structural integrity. The engineer's signature was clear. The date was November 3rd, 1883, 28 years to the day before the boy vanished. The notation described a successful compression test. The foundation stones had been set and inspected. The beacon housing had been delivered. Installation was scheduled for the following week. But at the bottom of the sheet, written in different ink, was an addendum. It stated the project had been suspended due to interference. The word interference was underlined 3 times. No further detail. No explanation of what had caused the suspension. The sheet had been filed incorrectly. It belonged with the 1883 archives. The keeper found it in the current year's documentation folder. The physician examined the old log sheet under magnification. The paper was authentic. The ink matched the period. But the addendum had been written recently, within the last 2 weeks. The handwriting did not match the engineer's signature. It matched the missing boy's composition notebook. The physician brought samples from the school. The loops and strokes were identical. Somehow the boy had written on a document created before his birth, or someone with his exact penmanship had. The physician had no category for this. He suggested forgery. But who would forge an addendum to an obscure engineering log from 1883? And how would they know to place it in the lighthouse at that specific time? The questions had no answers. The harbor master ordered the lamp mechanism dismantled on November 23rd. 3 engineers from the lighthouse service worked for 12 hours. They documented every component. The system was standard. Pressurized carbide feeding a mantle through regulated burners. The timing was controlled by a clockwork mechanism identical to dozens of other lighthouses across the Great Lakes. They found no abnormalities, no modifications, no reason for the timing irregularities the keeper reported. They reassembled the mechanism. The beacon resumed its cycle, 1 flash every 10 seconds, exactly as designed. But that night, at 3 in the morning, the beacon sequence changed again. The keeper documented it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 3 full seconds of darkness before the 10th flash. During those 3 seconds, the keeper saw light below the water, faint, moving in the same pattern as the beacon, rising from the direction of the abandoned foundation stones. The light pulsed once and disappeared. The beacon completed its cycle. The keeper called the guards. None of them had seen the underwater light. But one guard said his compass had spun during those 3 seconds. Spun so fast the needle blurred. When the beacon's 10th flash completed, the compass stopped, pointing north again. Steady. The telegraph operator received his last transmission on November 25th. The message was simple. Thank you for watching. No sender identification. The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. The operator attempted to trace the source. His equipment showed the transmission originated from the harbor, from the coordinates matching the abandoned foundation stones. He reported this. The harbor master ordered a boat to the location. They circled the area. Nothing, just water, just stones beneath the surface. The boat's radio crackled when they passed over the foundation. Static. Then silence. December came. The search was officially suspended. The boy was declared lost to the lake. His name was added to a memorial list maintained by the harbor office. The list documented all those who had disappeared into Superior without trace. The list was longer than most people realized. The keeper remained at his post. He continued to report timing irregularities. No one else could detect them. The harbor master suggested fatigue, suggested the keeper take leave. The keeper refused. He said someone needed to watch, needed to count. The beacon, he insisted, was carrying something now. Something extra. A weight in the light that had not been there before November 3rd. In January, the frost rings reappeared. Same size, same spacing, but deeper now. Carved into the metal as if by years of patient pressure. The assistant keeper documented them with photographs. The images showed the rings clearly. When the photographs were developed, they showed something else. A faint shape in one frame. Small. Human. Standing on the catwalk beside the lamp housing. The shape was translucent. The beacon's light passed through it. The photographer said it must be a double exposure, a mistake in the darkroom. But he had used a single plate. The shape appeared in only one frame. The rest were clean. The carbide lamp was found one final time on February 3rd, sitting on the rocks below the lighthouse. The keeper climbed down during low tide. The lamp was warm. The fuel chamber was empty, but the brass casing held heat as if it had been burning moments before. Inside the reservoir, he found a small object. A marble. Clear glass with blue ribbons frozen inside. The kind children played with. The keeper brought it to the harbor master. The boy's mother was asked to identify it. She said her son had owned marbles, but she had never seen one like this. She said the blue ribbons looked like light, like something that should be moving but was trapped instead. The beacon still flashes, one pulse every 10 seconds. White light sweeping across the harbor. The keeper retired in 1913. His replacement reported no irregularities. The timing was perfect. The mechanism functioned as designed. But sometimes on cold November nights, when the wind comes hard off the lake, people standing near the breakwater count the flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And in that last second before the 10th flash, they hear something. Not a sound exactly. A rhythm, softer than the beacon, steady as breathing. And if they look at the abandoned foundation stones 200 yards north, they might see light beneath the water, faint, brief, answering the beacon's call with a pulse of its own. Was the schoolboy carried into the light itself, his presence now woven into the beacon's rhythm? Or did the lake claim him in a way that mathematics and search parties could never trace? Subscribe so you don't miss the next story.